computer. So good morning, Dennis. So what we're going to do today, this is our fourth of these interviews. Last time we spoke, you had summarized your tour of Germany, and the next major tour, I think, my understanding of your service record was Vietnam. And my first question to you is, how did you prepare for your assignment to Vietnam? What did you do? Any special training or any places you had to go beforehand to get ready?
Well, I started at nine years old when I got my first BB gun.
Well, that may take us a while if we go that far.
Am I answering the question or you answer?
Go ahead.
And that gave me the opportunity to always be a very good shot.
Uh-huh.
So that was good training. La Salle Military Academy, the Citadel, assignments in Germany, and then I went to a jungle school. They gave me great company battalion tactics, small unit tactics training, and prepared me for whatever I would be doing in Vietnam. So
was that after Germany? Was that after Germany or before Germany, that last one?
All after Germany. I went to jungle school when I came home from Germany,
right.
And then I went to Vietnam.
Okay. Jungle school, did they try to teach you what to anticipate when you got to Vietnam, the weather and the challenges?
Well, it was at Fort Sherman, Panama, so the weather was the same as it was in Vietnam.
Uh-huh.
Hot, musky, full of snakes, alligators, all kinds of stuff, and so that pretty much prepared me for whatever I was going to do. As a matter of fact, when I was in jungle school, I said, what am I getting all this other small unit tactic training for? I'm going to a tank battalion.
Right.
And I'm not going to be out there walking in the woods and all that kind of stuff, or the swamps. But I would say the toughest thing for me to get ready to go to Vietnam was saying goodbye to my wife, who was a couple of months pregnant.
Yeah.
And that wasn't easy for me or easy for her. But, Susan and I met when we were 9, got married when we were 22, and she was one hell of a Army wife, and we just celebrated our 60th wedding anniversary. So I married the right girl.
Good. Okay, so there was, after Germany, then there was the general school, and there was the school in Panama. There were two separate schools?
No, the school that I went to in Panama was called the Jungle School.
Right.
Not the general school, the Jungle School.
Okay.
But go
ahead.
There were no more schools before I went to Vietnam.
Okay, so Germany, and then you went to the jungle school, and then you went.
Right.
Okay. And the jungle school, they try to get you acclimated to fighting in Vietnam, the weather and the climate and what to watch out for.
You were, because I was a captain, I was in charge of a squad of these brand new second lieutenants.
Right.
And second lieutenants out of OCS, the Officer Candidate School, they know everything.
Right.
They know everything.
Kind of like younger brothers.
So, part of my job was to train them how to live in the jungle, but I had to train them on being lieutenants. So I wouldn't say it was enjoyable, but the time passed pretty well. And it was a good training exercise for me, because I started in the tank battalion, but I ended up as an advisor in the mountains, in the swamps.
Okay.
With my mountain yard. So I got some good training.
We'll get to that. So second question, and this one is, maybe spend no more than 5 minutes on this. So my knowledge of Vietnam War, I knew about the French involvement, and I knew about the big battle of Dien Bien Phu. I knew about the partition of Vietnam as part of that peace settlement. How did in your mind, from your perspective, you can draw upon not only what you knew at the time and what you know now. How did the U.S. end up fighting that war?
Well, I've went to a couple of graduate schools, and I've done a lot of research and history on Vietnam, and wrote some theses on Vietnam. During World War II, Ho Chi Minh helped rescue downed U.S. airmen and crews that were shot down near or along the Vietnam, Cambodia area, and they would turn them into, repatriate them to the U.S. And we gave them supplies and guns, and that's how the Viet men really started. And then after the war, they had a number of conferences to decide how they were going to split up the world. England had all these possessions, India, all these countries. And one of the concerns was the French had their major Michelin plantations, rubber plantations, tea plantations, and teak plantations in South Vietnam. And they wanted not to vote with Ho Chi Minh to unify the country. And he threatened Truman that if we didn't support the French, he was going to pull out of NATO. And at the time, it was the French, the English, and the US that were the main key starts of NATO. As a matter of fact, if you ever visit Dien Bien Phu, make sure you stop by the grave sites of the American aviators that were shot down supporting the French during Dien Bien Phu. So we got tricked into supporting the French and splitting Vietnam into two countries, North Vietnam and South Vietnam. And then it continued from Truman started sending advisors. He started sending small units, and then it escalated, as each president came into power.
When did the French disengage, though? Did they disengage after Dien Bien Phu?
Yeah, they never fought for South Vietnam. They had plantations, but I never fought with the French soldier. They let that go to the U.S.
Right. And the debate with the French and them getting the U.S. to fight in the Vietnam War, was that during the de Gaulle administration in France?
Yeah, de Gaulle was the guy. Okay. He compromised Truman, and then Truman compromised the next president. And as those presidents came in, the escalation went up and up and up. So, when I was there in 68, got there in January 68 and left the end right before Christmas in 68. We had, a couple of 100,000 soldiers there. When I went back the second time, we were up to, I don't know, almost 500,000 soldiers over there.
When you first went, as it was explained to you, as you understood it, not now, but at the time, what was the overall mission of the U.S. engagement in Vietnam? I remember when you came back the first time, you had given me a little supply book, a packet you had. And in that packet was a letter from Westmoreland in the front of this little booklet, who explained why the U.S. was in Vietnam. I forget exactly what he said, but I'm sure it had something to do with dominoes and stopping.
Oh, yeah. He hoodwinked the U.S. into supporting South Vietnam. And yet he didn't have any Army soldiers over there that I ever saw.
Okay. Your view, when you went the first time, what was the overall purpose? What was the mission of the war?
Well, you got to remember I was a captain.
Yeah.
And that's pretty low on the totem pole.
Right. But you had to have something in your head while you were there.
Well, my mission was to kill the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong, wherever they were.
Correct. But the mission was that was your personal mission. But in terms of what was the overall, in your mind, as they explained it to you, the rationale for being there in the first place?
Well, to drive the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong out of the area. The problem we had was that as I got older and realized that we had too much direction from Westmoreland. We had too much direction from the presidents. We couldn't go into Cambodia after the enemy. We couldn't go into Laos after the enemy. We couldn't go into North Vietnam after the enemy. We couldn't bomb the ships in Haiphong Harbor because some of them were Chinese and Russian that were supplying North Vietnamese. So there were a lot of restrictions on what we could do and what we couldn't do.
And, But the overall rationale, and again, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, was it basically as the mission was explained to you, was to kick the North Vietnamese out of South Vietnam to preserve their independence and to fight back, stop the dominoes from falling?
Yeah, yeah, I
Okay.
would say that was it.
All right. And when you first went, what was your? I know you wanted to kill Viet Cong and North Vietnamese troops, but what was the mission of your initial assignment? Because initially you went there in armor, correct?
I was a company commander in a tank battalion, and I got there 2 weeks before the Tet Offensive.
Right.
And my mission for the first 2 weeks was to reorganize the unit that I was going to command. And
Mm-hmm.
it had mortars and scouts and tanks and ground surveillance, all kinds of tactical stuff.
Right.
And the commander had lent them out because we were under the 4th Division. We were responsible for whatever orders they gave us. And, I had my scout platoon was in Dak To.
Mm-hmm.
My mortar platoon was in Ban Me Tuot. My ground surveillance unit, thank God, was with me in my base camp, and so were my 3 tanks. And so I had stuff all over the place. So I organized that unit within 2 weeks, and then the 3rd week is when the Tet Offensive started.
So, so was the initial mission there to police the Ho Chi Minh Trail?
No, the Ho Chi Minh Trail was a hell of a lot of. It was far from where we were. I mean,
Okay.
South Vietnam is a long and not many people get near the Ho Chi Minh Trail unless you live to the west side of Vietnam.
Right. Wasn't there a major highway though that you were right near where you were?
Highway 19.
Mm-hmm. And why was that highway so pivotal? Was that a major supply route for the U.S.?
That was the major supply room to Kon Tum, Pleiku, Ban Me Tuot, Canto,
Right.
and it was a paved road by the French when they were fighting the Viet Cong.
So your guys, with that part of your mission was to keep that road open and to.
Well, we responded to requests for support.
Mm-hmm.
I just got my unit organized, and the Tet Offensive started. And the first thing I had to do was send my scout platoon back up to support the 1st Cav, which was 300 and something miles away. Then I had to send my mortar platoon to Dak To. Was it Dak To? Ban Me Tuot. Had to send them to Ban Me Tuot to support that unit. So I had units all over the place during the Tet Offensive.
Right. So we're on to the Tet Offensive. I was going to ask you about General Clark and Westmoreland, but I'm going to hold off on that. Let's get into the Tet Offensive. So my understanding of the Tet Offensive, the date that I think it actually began, at least as I understand it, was January 30th, 1968.
That could be right.
Yeah. So what was the impact? And, there are lots of historians. I don't tend to be an historian. I was alive during that time. I was a know-it-all teenager at that time. But in your view, and again, you can use your sense of where you are now. What was the overall impact of that Tet Offensive on the U.S. war effort there? It sounds like for you personally, it resulted in a change of mission, and you having to initially have to take a lot of the guys you had spent time training in your unit seemed to get fragmented to support the U.S. response to the Tet Offensive. But what was the overall impact in your mind on the Tet Offensive on the U.S. war effort?
Nothing. I mean, it was the same fight the Viet Cong and fight the NVA because it was a joint. The NVA thought that they could turn the South Vietnamese army against the U.S.
Right.
So we had Viet Cong, we had North Vietnamese, and we had some South Vietnamese that we had to fight. Now, I can tell you after the Tet Offensive, I never saw a Viet Cong unit bigger than a company. We killed all their battalions and their regiments and all that stuff.
So
one thing that had a lot to do with the Tet Offensive was Westmoreland was convinced that the North Vietnamese real mission was to take over a base camp
Mhm.
that had been taken over once before, and what was it called?
Quezon?
Quezon.
Mhm.
And so he had three divisions trying to get in and make Quezon a Dien Ben Phu type result
Mhm.
during the Tet Offensive. And he put a lot of pressure. We ended up, the Viet Cong never got into, and NVA never got into Quezon, but we lost a number of Marines. One of them was a high school friend of mine in my class. Uh, and that was a mess.
Mhm.
Not many people know about that, but that was the main. He was really focused on that. But he had this. He had the troops that beat the hell out of the NVA and the VC. So we thought we won the war. We
Right.
thought we won, not the war. We thought we won that battle, that offensive battle. And then we start reading about Concrete saying we lost the Tet Offensive because we didn't have the proper intel on
Mhm.
what the NVA was planning to do.
Right.
And so that was really the downfall. The press got a hold of that, and that was the downfall of the support for
Mhm.
Vietnam.
Right. Okay. You mentioned, I did a little bit of research in preparation for the call, and I had asked you when you reflected on the Citadel what you thought of General Clark, and you were very complimentary of General Clark. You quoted some things that he had personally taught you. You acknowledged his role in your getting the Cincinnatus Award. And I noted there was some interesting parallels between him and General Westmoreland. I noted that Westmoreland was superintendent of the Army at West Point before he got the assignment to command the U.S. troops in Vietnam. So there's some interesting parallels between those guys. I know you had a high regard of General Clark. What was, if you reflect on your relationship with General Clark and his good attributes, what was your opinion of Westmoreland?
Well, I didn't have a high opinion of Westmoreland. This was not a field soldier.
Mm-hmm.
He would travel for a day. He would travel in this helicopter. He'd have three different uniforms.
Mm-hmm.
So every time he went to another place, he changed into his starched fatigue, so he looked good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but how much he realized what was going on, I don't think he was a good field soldier.
And is that your view at the time, or that's your view knowing the hindsight of 50 years later?
Well, I think that's my view of the time
Mm-hmm.
because I was at places where he showed up,
Right.
uh, and although I never got to talk to him,
Mm-hmm.
uh, it's tough to understand what those four-star generals are thinking. But again, he was under the thumb of the president on
Mm-hmm.
what he could do and what he couldn't do.
Right.
You know?
Now, his tour, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm capable of error, as you well know. Um, didn't his tour, wasn't he replaced by Abrams shortly after the Tet Offensive?
Yes, yes.
And it was
Abrams Abrams came in, I would say, uh, in the spring of '68.
mm-hmm. Or spring of '69, or spring of '68. Okay, so it was shortly thereafter Westmoreland left after Tet.
Yeah.
And was that viewed as basically that it was time to make a change because he missed the boat there? Or
No, I mean, he went from there to the chief of staff of the army.
mm, okay, all right. So
Abrams, in comparison, was a real trooper. I mean,
mhm,
he was the commander of the lead tank battalion that from the Third Army that went into Bastogne.
right,
I mean, this was a field trooper,
yeah.
so he didn't care if his uniform was messed up from sweating or whatever. He was like one of the troops.
Yeah. Dennis, I'm reflecting back on discussions you and I had when I was 12 years old. And I remember it was either in a letter or it was in something you told me about how you started to see, and I think it was on the first tour, it appeared to be, I would describe it as corruption or political influence that complicated your role, how you responded, both amongst the government of South Vietnam and the ARVN itself. Am I remembering that correctly? I remember you telling me a story how you wanted to take out some unit, somewhere you were being fired upon, and you had to get all sorts of permission to fire back.
Yeah, well, in that part of the world, corruption's worse than it is in the United States.
Hmm.
I mean, how can we have 500 hospice centers in Minnesota
Okay,
in one town?
Stick to
So
Vietnam, please.
I'm saying that Vietnam was not that much different. You know, you got to follow the money and power. So there was corruption in the South Vietnamese army. Uh, a lot of South Vietnamese were getting rich,
Hmm.
uh, but I didn't have any taste of that until I became a mountain yard advisor,
Hmm.
which was later on that first tour.
That's my next question. So there you did sense there was the corruption that you encountered later on. Was that both within the government and the ARVN troops themselves?
Well, I couldn't tell much about the government,
Right.
but the government's responsible for putting the right people in the right place at the right time.
Right.
And everything was political.
Hmm.
So when I went to be a mountain yard advisor, not by choice, I got yanked out and made an infantryman.
Before you do that, could you give, because many people that may listen to this with your approval, of course, are not going to know who the Montagnards are. Their knowledge of the Montagnards probably comes from the Clint Eastwood movie, Gran Torino. Could you just
Yeah,
talk a little bit about the Montagnards, maybe 2 minutes or so, a little background, who they were? And
I guess the best example I could give you of the mountain yards, and I ended up with three different tribes of mountain
Mhm.
yards. I ended up with the Rade, the Jurai, and the Benar mountain yards,
Mhm.
all in my same battalion.
Mhm.
And actually, I had them broken into 9 platoons, three religions, three languages. Uh, yeah, my biggest challenge over there with them was communications because for an advisor, the Vietnamese government sent me a guy that spoke Vietnamese
Mhm.
and English. Didn't speak Grade, didn't speak Benar, didn't speak Jurai, and Jurai had a written language.
Mhm.
And anyway, so what I did was I reorganized the whole unit. But you asked me, um,
Biggest challenge, yeah.
the biggest challenge I had was staying alive and communications.
But who were they? Were they basically, would it be fair to say they were kind of the mountain people of Vietnam?
They were like three tribes of Indians in this country:
Mhm.
Comanche, Seminole, and Blackfoot.
Mhm.
Three different tribes, three different, you know, modus operandi, and it was very tough initially to get them to support me. And the fact that I reorganized each of those units so I had at least one Jurai
Mhm.
that again had a written language and spoke French.
Mhm.
Now my interpreter spoke Vietnamese, English, and a little French.
Mhm.
So for me to get the word to the platoons on what I wanted them to do,
Right.
I had to talk English to my advisor. He had to turn it into French and
Right.
then talk to the French speaking Jurai
Right.
that were in each of the 9 platoons. And then they would turn that into the language of that platoon.
And these Montagnards who you work with, were these they actually are like irregular troops? Were they troops that fought with you, or you had to
They were
train?
like the National Guard,
Hmm.
and they couldn't fight outside the province from which they were in. I was in Kanto province. That's the mountain yard name for that town, the capital.
Hmm.
And I was in a district which is like a province,
Hmm.
like Long Island's got Nassau County, Suffolk County. So in my province, there were three in my province, Kanto. There were three districts, and I was sent to Tuiman district uh, to to take care of these mountain yards, teach them how to fight, capture, identify supplies, and lucky for me, there weren't too many North Vietnamese in my area.
Hmm.
Uh, what the Vietnamese were doing in my area, where they were bringing supplies from Cambodia
Hmm.
and putting them into caches. So the people closer to the coast that couldn't get supplies because we had wiped out their sampan resupply route by sea, they would hoof up to 200 miles to where I was and pick up the weapons and the ammunition and then go back and fight.
Right.
So I dealt mostly with transportation, Viet Cong, and some North Vietnamese logisticians. I never had to face in that job, real fighters.
Right. Okay.
So
So
my mission was to find where these caches were
right.
and blow them up.
Yeah.
And if they were too big for me to blow up, I'd call in jets to blow them up.
Yeah. You told me again, I'm going back to 50, 60 years ago, but I remember you telling me a story about some guy from the north whose mission was to smuggle down a rocket. He got the rocket all the way down there, went to fire the rocket. It didn't go off. And they said, what do you do now? You go back, get another rocket.
Yeah.
So, okay. So
that was a 122 millimeter mortar round.
Yeah.
And when one of those would go off, like one of them went off not too far from where I was sleeping. Next morning, I get up and I go over to view the battle damage. Well, luckily, it landed and didn't hurt anybody. But somewhere there's a picture of me standing in the middle of that crater up to my chin. So that's how powerful those rockets were.
Yeah. Okay, last question. Because you're coming up at the end, I want to keep this to a half hour. Reflecting on your first tour, not the second tour, not the 50 years since, but reflecting on your first tour, what lessons did you take away? What did you learn that it helped you later on in your military career from your first tour of Vietnam? Answer it any way you want.
Well, there were many times my tank company picked up a company or battalion of infantry. So I got to train with really a combined arms team. I'd send the infantry out to find the enemy, and then my tanks and my mortars would blow up wherever they were. We had M48A3 tanks, which fired a very good 90 millimeter round. And we had white phosphorus, high explosive, canister. We could do the damage. We didn't want to go from where we were positioned to attack those bunkers because you'd have to go through rice paddies. And that's not a good place for a tank.
Right.
We'd let the infantry find the bad guys.
Right.
And they were very happy to turn those targets over to us. And then they would go in, battle damage and all that kind of stuff. So I learned a lot about combined arms. And that helped me a lot as I continued my career. But one story I need to tell you, you asked about, faith and all that kind of stuff. When I got to Bien Hoa, which was the initial landing place from Hawaii into Vietnam, you got processed for a week, and you got, if you wanted, if you were Catholic, you get a little book like this. Right. It's full of prayers and all kinds of stuff.
Right.
And I had also continued my subscription to this book, Magnificat, which I got once. And every day and every morning and every night there's reading. So that's how I kept up, when I was, I prayed more when I was being attacked at night by mortars and I couldn't tell where they were coming from. I was praying a lot more then than when I was, back in my base camp, sleeping in my cot. I had good. The soldiers responded pretty well. But two examples about the corruption. These mountain yards had 4 kids, and at the end of the month, they got a rice ration based on the size of their family. So it was payday, and that's when they got their rice ration and their pay. So I had this little mountain yard come up to me, and he was like a buck sergeant in the Army. And he was explaining to me that the lieutenant that was issuing the rice only gave him a rice ration for 2 kids.
Mhm.
He had 9.
Mhm.
So what happened to the other 7 rations?
Mhm.
That guy was pocketing that rice.
Mhm.
So I went back and got that straightened out. And then another mountain yard came up to me and said they didn't pay him enough. Again, it was what rank you were, how long you were with the mountain yards, and how many kids you had.
Mhm.
And again, this guy got shortchanged. Well, who got the money? So I really blew up that whole payment system that was set up by the South Vietnamese in
Mhm.
the province from Canton. And another incident I had is water at the top of a mountain is kind of tough to get. Uh, so I flew with the aviators that flew bird dogs, single engine, fixed wing, and they would do reconnaissance for the whole area.
Mhm.
And I'd fly with them so I could research my district. My district was this big. Uh, well, it was big. I don't know how big it was. And my district had been overrun 3 years before and killed everybody. And they
Mhm.
didn't put anybody else back there until I got there. And so I was both the district advisor and I was also the mountain yard uh, commander.
Mhm.
And so what I did with the Air Force is they would get their fuel in 55-gallon drums. And when they would empty them, they just throw them aside.
Mhm.
So what I would do is to get the mountain yards, we go down and we cut the top off the 55-gallon drum, clean it out
Mhm.
completely from the fuel fumes. And then we take them back to where we lived up on this mountain. And then they would position that 55-gallon drum near their bohio or their hut. And during the rainy season and whatever, the water would drain right into that 55-gallon drum. And so it was really a privilege for them to get those.
Mhm.
But before I got there, it was very sparse.
Mhm.
So I got them every week.
Right.
And I would give them to the people that I thought needed them, like the guy with 9 kids, the guy with 7 kids. And all of a sudden, one day I had given all those out. And of course, I couldn't supply 300 people at the same time. You know, took a while. And I noticed somebody else rolling one of those 55-gallon drums that I didn't give it to.
Mhm.
I had given it to a guy in his squad, and this guy was a sergeant, and the guy in his squad was a private.
Mhm.
So I went up to him and said, "Give me that 55-gallon drum. It belongs to me. And I'm lending it to the guy in your unit. He needs it. You don't need it." Again, another way there was corruption going on.
Right.
So I saw the corruption uh, of the Vietnamese, and I saw the corruption with pay, with rice, and all this kind of shit. And this is a mountain yard province.
Mhm.
Before the Vietnamese took over the chain of command in that, it was all mountain yard.
Mhm.
And so the Vietnamese come in after the Geneva Convention or whatever it was, and they put all Vietnamese in charge of the government, the governor, the district guys, and all that kind of stuff, pay people and all that. And it was a well established area for the mountain yards. Matter
Mhm.
of fact, we had a full time Protestant minister that had lived there all through World War II. He helped the Jurai write their language.
Mhm.
Uh, Dr. Evans was his name. I'd see him occasionally, and I'd go to some of his services, even though they weren't Catholic,
Mhm.
because it was a long way to where the Catholic chapel was, the cathedral was in the capital city of that province. And I'd go there every so often, but I would spend a lot of time with Dr. Evans, and he helped me out a lot.
Good. Okay. So listen, we've gone now about 37 minutes. This is why I said that you would we it to be a little bit longer when I send you these tapes. I'll start with sending you this recording. It'll come later today, and when you get done with this one, I'll be happy to send you the other ones. And it's been an honor and a privilege to interview you. I certainly learned some new things, and I really appreciate you making yourself available and sharing your wisdom here.
Now we're going to do another one because you had.
Yeah, I got another one. Give me some time to get my act together. I got to go from you to marking homework over at my MBA program. So I'll get back to you. We can set something up next week.
What you need to do is go through the questions you sent me for this interview,
right,
and the questions that you sent me for the last interview, because we didn't finish the questions from that last interview.
Okay, I'll take a look at those. I'll be happy to do that. And I got to let myself go here because I need to now mark homework. I got a window because Sue and I are going to go do the rosary. So I'm going to stop recording here. I can yak here for another minute here. Let's see. Stop recording. Stop recording.